Kenosha County authorities have arrested Cal Rittenhouse. Cal Rittenhouse. Cal Rittenhouse is the killer of Kenosha. This is the child that basically went to Kenosha, ends up shooting and killing, murdering two protesters, shooting one guy's arm off. You have to see it to believe it. It's a stunning thing to watch, actually, to see what happens in the beginning, what happens in the moment, what happens after. And then, more interesting, what happens after that, when the cops finally give their announcement and announce the person who they've apprehended, the child, 17-year-old. In fact, can't even call him a child. You put your boots on, I suppose you got to walk it. No, 17-year-old, he's a child. But I want to show you what happened that night, because there's all sorts of video footage on what happened that night, which is probably why they apprehended Rittenhouse, killer Cal Rittenhouse, so quickly. Let's talk about it, because this gets into cops. This gets into, in some weird way, cops boosting up white nationalists. It's like, hey, I need you to help me do my job. And this also gets into this notion of the protest itself. Whether you want to call it a protest or riot, whatever you want to call it, a lot of people screaming, angry, pissed off, justifiably so. And the white nationalists in trucks that come and gets involved against unarmed protesters. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. I like to say this content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. So, Kenosha, Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the spine by a cop that's holding onto his shirt as he tries to get into his car. Apparently, Jacob Blake was initially, as far as I can tell, breaking up a dispute between two people that were there. I don't know what happened, so let's say yada, yada, yada. Apparently, there was some kind of scuffle. He gets back up. He tries to get to his car. He has his children in the car, 3 kids. The cop grabs onto his shirt to stop him from getting into his car, or I suppose trying to get away, shoots him in the back. Now, here's the thing. In the midst of a scuffle like that, are you really in your entire right mind when you are being assaulted, basically, by cops? And trying to, I suppose, in this kind of fight or flight mechanism that kicks off, trying to get away and trying to get to the car. Is there any other mechanism that they could use? Did they know that he had kids in the car? Did they honestly believe that he was going to go and get a gun from the car and have a gunfight with the cops while his kids were in the car? I mean, for God's sakes, if there is a rational action, that's all I'm asking for. And I don't think that's necessarily a big axe. If there is a altercation between you and the cops, if there is a rational way for the cop to end that without that person losing their life, that should be the standard. Not this nonsense of maximum justice at any particular moment when the cops feels like it. That's nonsense. Does your society value its citizens, yea or nay? If it does, it has to value them, even on their worst days. This is me saying it that would agree with you. Don't do that. When I'm looking at the behavior of somebody that is engaging, and I think that's going to turn bad because that cop is a maniac, and that maniac may murder you. By the same token, that's wrong if he does. Just because my expectation is that expectation is set by the society itself and what the society allows, what the society does, what the society has a tendency to do. 2013 to, if I'm not mistaken, 2019. Cops, 1,000 killings a year, 99% walk. Understand what that means. Do you think that would inhibit or allow? Meaning, do you think that level of unaccountability would inhibit an officer from taking that shot, even if that shot wasn't necessarily necessary? Or do you think it would make him more likely to kill? Of course, it would make the individual more likely if there's not that second thought, because ultimately you have a legal system that has no accountability in it. If your legal system indeed has little to no accountability in it, and your population has realized it, flesh to bone realized it, then why should they attend to the social contract? Think about what I'm saying. We supposedly, one law, but that law is not shared equally. And the burden of the state that tends to, let's say, the blunt hand of the state tends to come down on one more than others. I would add this to it. Whether it comes down on one more than others in a percentage thing is almost secondary to the fact that you have 1,000 killings a year. That's appalling. That's not normal. It's normal for us. It's not normal for human beings. If you're looking around the world, that should not be accepted at all. White, black, gay, straight, whatever. That should not be accepted. I get it. The African Americans right now are pissed off. They should be pissed off. By the same token, they shouldn't be alone in being pissed off at the level of violence. The anger should be that the cops have killed another person. The race of the person, yes, it will matter in some cases, but in this very specific instance, the point I'm making here is cops kill a lot of people a year. Your society, for whatever reason, accepts it. Why is it that African Americans are the only ones that are pissed off when cops murder somebody, shoot somebody in the back, shoot somebody that was unarmed, beat somebody up? Why are we accepting of this? I hope you understand what I mean by that. Zero tolerance. If your society is not going to look after you, it's not going to protect your interests, in fact, is even going to be more likely to injure, beat, kill, imprison you, then why are you shocked that your society that feels this great injustice at this responds? It is the most natural thing in the world. Now, I understand. I don't like rioting either. Are there other ways to use that energy? Possibly. By the same token, extremes create extremes, especially when there is no accountability. When people say no justice, no peace, they're not saying it for shits and giggles. They're not saying it because it sounds good. They're making the point that people have this ingrained thing when there is a deficit of justice, and that deficit at some point has to be made up. And it is made up in ways that is often hitting people, honestly, who may not have anything to do with what the situation was. All right. Protests. The protests are valid in some cases. You have some people, of course, who are peaceful, but you also have some people who are setting cars on fire, who are basically vandalizing shops, if I'm not mistaken, even beating people up. I got to be honest, I don't necessarily approve of that. But it's not for my approval. Ultimately, you have a political system, a society, that is doing something that is agitating people to act that way. It is easy to look at the protesters. It is a little bit more difficult to look at your society and figuring out why. That's because ultimately there's an aspect of society that is comfortable. And that aspect of society that is comfortable does not entirely deal with that situation. So they are more likely to say, the protesters. I'm making a point. Why are they out there? It's not just Wisconsin, by the way. There's another protest going on, if I'm not mistaken, in Louisiana for another guy that was shot. You have to reconcile this. So right here. So this is early on. This was earlier before everything took off. Let's watch what goes down. This is the cop dealing with Kittenhouse. Not Kittenhouse. What is his name? Was that right? Rittenhouse. That's what it was. Rittenhouse, not Kittenhouse. Rittenhouse. Come on. There we are. All right. So let's, early in the night, watch this. Cops, white nationalists, buddy.
That's what started most of it. Now we're all the way back by the gas station again.
Hey, thank you guys, man. Need water? Seriously. Guys, far right, you need water. We'll throw you one.
All right. So cops throw white nationalists water from a Humvee, their buddy. walking together, talking. I would imagine that if you were one of those white nationalists, including that 17-year-old, that you might think to yourself, we're here in a similar capacity. Why wouldn't you? I mean, the cops didn't tell him to go home, which ideally you would think that would take place. I mean, what do you really want citizen militias out fighting protesters? And is that not a situation that can end up in somebody dying? Yeah, infinitely foreseeable. Right here. This is part of it. I'm not going to show the whole thing because I don't want YouTube shutting me down for saying, oh, you're showing violent content. But this is the scene. This is what happened last night, the other night. Shots are fired. I don't want to show the scene because, again, I don't want YouTube to ding me for it. But 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots. Now, at a certain point, the people were killed, of course. One guy has his arm blown off. And clearly, this is chaos. Moment after. Take a look at this. Now, white privilege is a motherfucker. Think about what just happened here. Cops are coming on the scene. There's a protest. It's understood there's a protest. There were people who came from another state, including Cal here, with a weapon to encounter those protesters. Is that not the job of cops? Do we really want civilians fighting other civilians? Because Cal has no authority. And if Cal is going to engage somebody, Cal, again, has zero authority. His only authority is that weapon. And that is exactly what he used. What did Cal think was going to happen? Did Cal think this was a video game? Did Cal think that people who were pissed off and cross and showing that in frenetic and sometimes damaging ways, did he believe that he was going to be immune to that? Or did he think they would leave me alone because of this huge gun that's hanging around my chest here? And that I had tacit approval by the cops. I mean, after all, they gave me water, right? What did Cal think this was? He decides to go to this. He decides to get into some kind of intervention or some kind of conflict. He, just like that other guy that murdered Trayvon Martin, after getting his ass kicked, fired shots. Cal, as a flat fact, could have been sitting home playing Xbox. Cal could have been sitting at home masturbating. Cal could have been sitting at home doing whatever he wanted to do. Cal made a choice to go and intervene into a protest. Cal made the choice to bring his gun with him to a protest. Cal made the choice to somehow get into some altercation because, after all, he was there for some particular reason and he did engage. And this person who has zero authority over anybody else pops off shots, murders 2 people, blows the arm off 1. The kid that just murdered 2 people casually walks to the cops. Casually. With the murder weapon. Casually walks to the cops. And what happens at that point? Nothing. Nothing. He's not maced. He's not tear gas. He's not shot. He's not tasered. Nobody hits him with a Humvee. Nobody hits him with a car. Shots are fired. And this guy is walking towards the cops with a weapon. And they keep telling him, sir, go back, sir, don't come forward. And he's trying to explain to him who he's with. Who he's with. Who he is with. Isn't that astonishing? Isn't that astonishing? Cal here skips town and goes back home. Cal is finally arrested. Now, the wild part about this, again, Cal made the choice to go there. Cal made the choice to intervene. Cal fired the shots. What did Cal expect to take place in this situation? Also, is this what you want? Do you really want armed people, gangs of right-wing thugs coming to a protest or riot, whatever you want to call it, to try to hold back the night, having zero authority to do so with the weapon that's in their hand? What do you think they're going to use that weapon if they are, again, getting their ass kicked. You realize that having right-wing gangs and lunatics come to these events will incentivize, it would have to, the protesters to do the same, entirely out of self-defense. Whether you're talking about countries and putting weapons in space, forcing other countries to do the same because they can't necessarily allow themselves to be held at that level of disadvantage. This will be the same. Mark my words. Listen to the cop, though. So after he's caught, listen to the Kenosha police chief talk about this situation. This kid has decided to go to a protest, get involved in an altercation, murder 2 people in an altercation and shooting one in the arm, and he walks calmly to the cops, strolling along the way with the murder weapon, and the cops apparently let him go. He catches Cal. Listen how broken up he is about what's going on.
Everybody involved was out after the curfew. I'm not going to make a great deal of that, but the point is the curfew's in place to protect. Had persons not been out involved in violation of that, perhaps the situation that unfolded would not have happened. So the last night, the 17-year-old individual from Antioch, Illinois, was involved in the use of firearms to resolve whatever conflict was in place. The result of it was 2 people are dead. Persons were shot. Everybody involved was out after the curfew. I'm not going to make a great deal of that.
Notice, notice the passive tense. Altercation. Weapons. Shots fired. He was involved in it in some particular way. If people would have just stayed home, this would have never taken place. I'll do you one better. If Cal would have stayed home and masturbated, if Cal would have never brought the gun to a protest, if Cal would have never gotten into an altercation, if Cal would have never fired their shots, then yes, you're entirely right. This would have never happened. But Cal did those things. Cal is guilty of those things. Cal is on video doing those things. And so, where do you want to start it? The protesters, at the very least, are out there protesting something that is legitimate and that is real and that people are angry about. Now, you can say Cal is out there defending property, but what is Cal really going to do? I'm going to burn this car. I'm going to shoot you in the face if you do. Burning the car, shot in the face. Is the shot in the face justified for the burning of the car? And is a cop going to look at that and say, okay, clean shoot. You did violence to this inanimate object. And so your shooting that man in the face is perfectly warranted. I'm making the point that you're limited in your abilities of what these mobs of right-wingers can do other than get into this type of altercation, this type of violence. Your question as a cop is, will you do your jobs? Meaning, if you think that the protest or the riots or whatever you want to call it is so over the top, then you are there to put them back. That is the legal device that your state allows for implication of order. What is not necessarily going to fly is having randos out there thinking this is some video game. Children, no less. Children soldiers. Right-wingers are now using child soldiers. Yeah, that's fucking insane. And yet that's what we have. The police chief thinks it's all the protesters' fault in that situation. I disagree. Cal had all sorts of agency. Maybe you could say his agency was constrained by how he was brought up, by the people he was around. Fair enough. But he had agency. And yeah, that child murdered 2 people. He's a child murderer or child soldier of the right wing, however you want to call it. And either way, ideally, his ass would be going to prison. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. I'll be back in a moment if I see a good story.